The February air cut through the frozen New York highway like shattered glass. Every breath burned. Aria Bennett's 15-year-old Honda Civic sat dead on the shoulder of Route 87, engine smoking, the clear winter night so cold that frost formed on the windshield from the inside. Her hands shook violently as she gripped the steering wheel. One eye was swollen completely shut, purple and black. Handprint bruises ringed her throat like a necklace of violence. Blood had dried on her split lip. On the passenger seat lay two things that told the entire story of her life collapsing. A crumpled foreclosure notice. $78 in cash. That was everything. $78. Everything she had left in the world. She could see her breath in white clouds inside the car. The stars above were sharp as diamonds, indifferent and beautiful. The highway was empty. No headlights had passed in 20 minutes. The temperature outside was dropping below zero. Her phone had died 3 hours ago. The gas tank was empty. Her daughter Ava was with her mother for the night, and Aria had no idea how she would explain any of this tomorrow. She laid her forehead against the steering wheel and did not cry. She could not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere between Tyler Brennan's fists and the moment Cordelia Blackwood had dragged her down the stairwell by her hair. Then the night changed. Headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. Not one car. 5. Black SUVs moving in perfect formation down the empty highway like predators closing on wounded prey. They were slowing. They were stopping. The center vehicle's door opened with mechanical precision. A man stepped out into the frozen darkness. Vincent Calabrese was 52 years old, but the weight he carried made him seem ancient. Silver streaked his dark hair at the temples. His face was carved from Sicilian stone, all sharp angles and controlled rage. He wore a black wool coat that cost more than Aria had earned in the last 3 months of double shifts at the diner. His movements were deliberate, each step measured like a general surveying a battlefield. 2 men emerged from the other vehicles and stood behind him, watching. Waiting. Ready. He approached her window. She could not move. The cold had taken her ability to think. His eyes, dark and ancient with grief, found hers through the frosted glass. He did not speak. He simply opened her car door. The freezing air rushed in like a predator. Her throat was too damaged to scream. When she tried to speak, only a broken whisper emerged. Please. Vincent Calabrese looked at her swollen eye. He looked at the handprint bruises darkening her throat. He looked at the foreclosure notice. He looked at the $78. His jaw tightened. Something shifted behind his eyes. Something that had been dead for 3 years seemed to come alive. He said 5 words that changed everything. You are coming with me. She tried to move away. But her body would not obey. Shock and cold and hunger and desperation held her frozen against the seat. This man was dangerous. Every part of her that had survived this long by reading danger in faces could feel it radiating from him like heat from a furnace. He was the kind of dangerous that got people killed. But the alternative was freezing on a highway with $78 and a foreclosure notice. I do not know you, she said. Her voice sounded like something broken trying to speak. No, he said. You do not. But you are leaving this car now. You are getting into the black SUV. And no one is going to hurt you again. It was not a question. It was not an offer. It was a statement of absolute fact delivered in a voice like thunder. Behind him, the 2 men, one with a scar running from his eye to his cheekbone, the other with silver rings on every finger, exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years. Marco and Enzo had worked for Vincent Calabrese since they were young men. They had seen him order executions with less emotion than other men ordered coffee. They had never seen him approach a stranger with gentleness. Aria gathered the foreclosure notice. She took the $78. She stood on legs that barely held her weight and stepped into the frozen night. The pain in her ribs flared sharp and white. Tyler Brennan's boots had left their message there too. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from crying out. Vincent opened the rear door of the center SUV. The interior was warm. There were leather seats and a woman in a gray medical coat who looked like she had been waiting. The woman's eyes softened when she saw Aria's face. "My name is Dr. Valentina," the woman said. "You need medical attention. We are going to take you to a place where you are safe." Aria stepped into the warmth. The door closed behind her. The sound it made was final, like the lid of a coffin being sealed on her old life. Through the tinted window, she watched Vincent Calabrese return to the front SUV. She could not hear what he said to Marco and Enzo, but she saw Marco nod. She saw Enzo pull out a phone. She understood, somehow, that she had just activated something. That there were now people whose sole purpose would become finding the people who did this to her. The convoy pulled back onto the empty highway. Aria sat in the warm darkness as Dr. Valentina examined her eye with a small flashlight. "The swelling will go down in 2 weeks," Dr. Valentina said. "But you need to rest. You need food. And you need to tell someone what happened." Aria looked at the woman. She looked at the leather seats. She looked at her reflection in the dark window, a woman who had been invisible her entire life suddenly sitting in a vehicle worth more money than she had ever earned. "Who is he?" Aria asked. Dr. Valentina did not answer directly. "In this city, there are very few people who can truly protect you. Vincent Calabrese is one of them. You have just become the most interesting thing that has happened in his world in a very long time. And I assure you, the people who hurt you have no idea what is coming." The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark. The city lights were distant. Somewhere behind them, in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, Tyler Brennan was probably drinking from the bottle of whiskey he kept under his bed. He was probably laughing about the way she had begged him to let her stay. He was probably not thinking about her at all. Somewhere else, in a luxury penthouse on the Upper West Side, Cordelia Blackwood was probably straightening her designer clothes in a floor-to-ceiling mirror. She was probably checking her phone for messages from the lawyers who handled her money. She was not thinking about the way Aria's head had struck the corner of the stair. She did not care about the bruises. In Cordelia's world, people like Aria were less than nothing. What they did not know was that $78 on a frozen highway had just become the most expensive cost of their lives. Before we continue, drop a like if this story is hitting you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to understand how Aria Bennett, a widow carrying $85,000 in her dead husband's debt, ended up bleeding on a frozen highway with nothing but the clothes on her body and a man she had never met suddenly willing to burn the world for her. 21 days before the frozen highway. 21 days before the black SUVs emerged from the darkness. Aria Bennett sat at a kitchen table that had belonged to someone else in a life that no longer existed, counting money that was not enough. $1, $2, $3. The bills were worn, creased from being counted so many times they had begun to feel like paper skin. $5, $7. She arranged them in a line across the Formica table type, each bill a small admission of failure. $12, $15. The kitchen light hummed above her, the bulb flickering at intervals that matched her heartbeat. Outside the window, Queen sprawled beneath November darkness. The apartment was small, the kind of space that had been divided and subdivided until it could barely hold a life. 2 bedrooms that were really 1 bedroom split by a thin wall. A kitchen that was barely larger than a closet. A living room where everything happened: eating, sleeping, praying, crying, the small rituals of survival. Aria was 31 years old, but her hands told a different story. Calloused across the palms, nail bed stained from kitchen work, the skin around her knuckles cracked and bleeding from cleaning chemicals. Her hair was dark, pulled back so tightly it stretched the skin at her temples. Her eyes were green, but the light had gone out of them somewhere around the day Daniel died. That was 8 months ago. 8 months of drowning. $23. $25. $28. The envelope beside her was thick with paper. bills that had arrived under her door, bills that had been slipped through the mail slot, bills that had found her no matter how many times she changed, nothing about her address because there was nowhere else to go. The utility bill. The credit card statement. The hospital bill from Daniel's last week, the one where they kept him alive for 6 days and kept her hoping for a miracle that never came. The court notice from the bank. The lawyer's letter. And the foreclosure notice, creased from being folded and unfolded so many times she could feel the texture of her own desperation in the paper. $85,000. That was what Daniel had owed. That was what she had learned in the lawyer's office 3 months after they buried him, 3 months after she had believed the worst was over, 3 months before she understood that the worst was only beginning. Gambling debts. Loan shark debts. Credit cards maxed on poker games she had never known about, played in rooms she had never seen, in a version of her husband that had existed somewhere she could not reach. The lawyer had been kind in the way people are kind when they are telling you your life has ended. He had explained that the debts did not die with Daniel. They attached themselves to his estate. They attached themselves to her. She was a widow, but she was also now a debtor. The creditors had patience. The creditors had lawyers. The creditors had the law. 10 days. That was what the notice said. 10 days to produce $85,000 or the apartment would be seized. The apartment where Ava slept in the next room. The apartment that cost $370 a month, which meant even if she paid nothing else, no food, no electricity, no heat, she would still be short by $84,630. $30. $32. The money on the table represented what she had left after paying utilities yesterday. 2 days of food for 2 people. Ava had asked for juice at breakfast. Aria had given her water and told her it was special water, water from the fancy grocery store, and Ava had believed her because children believe their mothers. That was the cruelest thing about it. They believe. Footsteps sounded above her head. Someone was awake in the apartment upstairs. The building creaked with the lives of other people, other mothers probably, other impossible mathematics. How many of them had money? How many of them were counting bills at 3:33 in the morning because counting bills meant she was not thinking about what would happen when there were no more bills to count? The apartment was cold. The heating had gone out 3 weeks ago and the landlord had said he would fix it and then had not fixed it, and she had not asked again because asking meant risking his attention, and his attention was the thing she feared most. A sound came from the other room. Ava turning over in bed, the small sounds of a child sleeping, the absolute trust of a 6-year-old who believed her mother would keep her safe. Who did not know that safe was no longer an option. Aria folded the bills back into her pocket. $35. $36. $38. She had miscounted. She always miscounted because her hand shook when she counted money anymore. The foreclosure notice sat on the table. She picked it up, read the numbers again, the dates, the legal language. $78. That was all she had left. All she had between today and the day everything was taken away. The apartment was silent. Ava was sleeping. The building was sleeping. The city was sleeping. And Aria sat in the cold light of the kitchen, feeling the weight of $85,000 pressing down on her chest like a stone that would not let her breathe. 3 jobs. That was what she had now. She had started looking for them 6 months ago, before the debts, before the notice, before she understood that the mathematics of survival required working more hours than existed in a day. The diner opened at 5 a.m. Aria was there at 4:45 a.m., tying her apron, her hands already knowing the motions, the coffee pot, the order pad, the smile she had learned to paint across her face like a mask. The diner was a narrow space on Queens Boulevard, the kind of place where the same men sat at the same counter and ordered the same eggs and never looked at her directly, or looked at her in ways that made her skin feel wrong. She worked from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. 5 hours. She made $32 in tips, mostly singles from men who thought 5% was generosity. Mrs. Chen, who owned the diner, paid her $40 for the shift. $72 before noon. At noon she was in an office building in Manhattan. She cleaned offices, pushed a mop across floors that had been walked on by people who would never notice her, would never know she had been there except for the gleaming floor. 5 hours of cleaning, 5 offices that belonged to lawyers and investment firms and companies whose purposes she did not understand. $30 in pay. No tips. The office workers did not leave tips. At 6 p.m., she was back in Queens at the laundromat. The laundromat was the third job, the job that had no set hours, the job where she worked when she was supposed to be sleeping. She sorted clothes, ran machines, folded towels that came back stained and returned them to people who complained they were not clean enough. $16 an hour, worked anywhere from 4 to 7 hours depending on whether the machines broke down, depending on whether customers came. $340 a week. That was her income. $340 to cover $400 in rent, utilities, food, the medication for the asthma Ava had, the small miracle that kept her daughter breathing. The mathematics did not work. The mathematics had never worked. But Aria had learned to live in the space between what was possible and what was necessary, and she had learned to do it while appearing normal, while appearing fine, while appearing like a woman who was not standing on the edge of an abyss. Mrs. Chen noticed that Aria was moving slower today. The diner was crowded with the breakfast rush, the usual men, the regulars who always ordered the same things. Aria moved between tables with plates held high, her smile in place, her voice steady. Coffee? Eggs over easy? Toast with that? She did not tell Mrs. Chen about the foreclosure notice. She did not tell her about the $78. She did not tell her that in 9 days she would have no apartment and no address and no place to leave her daughter while she worked 2 more jobs that would not feed them anyway. Instead, she poured coffee and smiled and took orders and pretended the weight was not there, the weight of $85,000 and Daniel's secret debts and a daughter who was sleeping in a cold apartment and a city that had no mercy for people like her. At 11 a.m., she left the diner. She had 2 hours to get to the office building. Usually she took the subway. Today she walked. Walking was free. Walking was the only thing left that was free. The November air was sharp. The wind came off the buildings and cut through her thin jacket. She had bought the jacket 5 years ago. It had no lining anymore. The office building was on Park Avenue. She cleaned the same 5 offices, the same carpet, the same desks. One lawyer had a photo on his desk. A woman and 2 children. They looked happy. Aria did not allow herself to look at it too long. At 5 p.m., she was back on the subway. At 6 p.m., she was at the laundromat, and the night began. The laundromat was owned by a man named Hassan who did not care that she existed. That was good. That meant he left her alone. She worked 7 hours that night, stopping at midnight when the last customer left. She made $112. The fluorescent lights hummed above her, the washing machines churned, and somewhere in the city, Ava was sleeping in her neighbor's apartment, a woman named Rosa who had children of her own and who watched Ava because Aria paid her $20 a night, which meant the money was already gone before it arrived. At 1 a.m., she walked home. The streets were empty. Queens at night looked like a place that had been abandoned. The buildings had no lights on. The sidewalks had no people. She was alone in a city of 8 million people, walking through the cold in a jacket with no lining, counting the money she had made, understanding that it was not enough, that it would never be enough. The apartment was cold when she arrived. She got Ava from Rosa's, carried her sleeping body home, laid her down in the bed they shared. Ava did not wake. Aria lay beside her, feeling the small warmth of her daughter, the only warm thing in the apartment. She did not sleep. At 3 a.m., a text message came through her phone. The phone was old, the screen cracked. The message was from Tyler Brennan, her landlord. "Tomorrow we settle this. One way or another." Aria read the message 3 times. She did not respond. Tyler Brennan was the kind of man who did not wait for responses. He was 47 years old, thick-shouldered, with hands that were always touching things, the walls, the doors, the edges of his own expensive suit. He wore a gold watch that cost more than a year of her salary. He owned 6 buildings in Queens, which meant he collected rent from 6 buildings worth of people who were trapped exactly like she was. He had come to the apartment 2 weeks ago. He had knocked on her door at 9 p.m., when she should have been sleeping, when she should have been recovering from her shift at the diner. She had opened the door. He had stepped inside without being invited, closing the door behind him, his eyes moving across the small apartment like he was assessing its value. "You know, Aria, there are other ways to pay rent. I'm a reasonable man." She had not responded. She had stood very still, one hand on the door handle, the other at her side, trying to make herself small. "I can give you 2 extra weeks. Maybe a month." His eyes had traveled down her body. Slowly. Not hiding. Confident in a way that made her skin feel like it did not belong to her. "All I need is for you to be reasonable too. I'll have the money, Tyler. Just give me time." He had smiled. The smile had not reached his eyes. It had only been a display of teeth. "Time ran out, sweetheart. You've got 72 hours. He had left after that. He had not touched her. He did not need to. The threat was already there, embedded in the air he breathed, in the space his body occupied, in the absolute certainty that she had no power and he had all of it. And now, at 3 a.m., lying beside her sleeping daughter, she read the message again. "Tomorrow we settle this. One way or another." The apartment was cold. The city was cold. The future was cold. She held Ava closer, feeling her daughter's small heartbeat against her chest, and she understood that tomorrow, everything would change. But she did not know how. She did not know that in another apartment across the city, a man named Vincent Calabrese was making plans that would intersect with hers. She did not know that $78 and a frozen highway were already coming toward her like a blade wrapped in ice. She did not know that the worst night of her life would become the first night of something entirely different. All she knew was that tomorrow, she had to face Tyler Brennan. And she had no idea what that would cost her. The stairwell smelled like concrete dust and ammonia. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly white that made the world look like a photograph of itself, colorless, flat, already dead. Aria climbed toward the 3rd floor, her nurse's scrub still damp with someone else's bodily fluids, her shoes making soft sounds on the bare steps. She had worked 14 hours straight. Her feet screamed. Her lower back was a knot of pain that no amount of stretching could untangle. All she wanted was to slip into bed beside Ava, feel her daughter's small warm body, and pretend for 7 hours that her life made sense. She did not see them until they were already there. Tyler Brennan stood on the landing between the 3rd and 4th floors, his bulk blocking the narrow passage. Cordelia Blackwood stood 2 steps below him, her arms folded across her chest, her designer heels, real leather, worth more than a week of Aria's wages, catching the light. They were waiting. They had been waiting. Tyler smiled. The smile had no warmth in it. It was just the shape of teeth. "Aria." He said her name like it tasted bad. "We need to talk about your situation." She tried to move past them. Tried to angle her body sideways and slip by. It was stupid. She knew it was stupid even as she was doing it. Tyler's hand shot out and grabbed her arm. His finger circled her bicep completely, his thumb pressing into the inside of her elbow where the nerve bundles lived. Pain shot down her entire arm like lightning. "I gave you a chance to be smart," he said, his voice dropping into that register he used when he was about to hurt someone. "You chose to be stupid." "I have the money," Aria gasped. "I told you I would have it. Just give me." He shoved her backward. Her spine hit the concrete wall hard enough that stars exploded in her vision. The impact drove the air from her lungs. For a moment there was only the sensation of falling while standing still, of the world tilting, of gravity becoming something negotiable. His hand moved to her throat. His fingers closed around her neck like a trap closing. His palm was against her windpipe. His thumb was against her carotid artery. He was not squeezing with all his strength, not yet, but the threat was there, embedded in the weight of his hand, in the absolute certainty that he could close his fist and end this whenever he wanted. She clawed at his fingers. Her nails found skin and dug in. She drew blood. She scratched for red lines down the back of his hand. He did not let go. "Please," she choked out, but the sound came out as something less than a whisper, something less than human. Cordelia watched from the stairs, her expression unchanged. "Don't mark her too badly, Tyler. We don't need police." He released her throat. Her body folded at the knees, gasping, desperate for air that felt like it would not come. There was not enough oxygen in the world. There was not enough oxygen in the entire building. He backhanded her across the face. The impact snapped her head sideways. She tasted blood. Her right eye exploded into white-hot pain. She could feel it swelling already, the tissue puffing up, the capillaries rupturing under her skin. By morning she would not be able to see out of it. She collapsed on the stairs. Her body fell 3 steps before she could catch herself. Her ribs hit concrete. Pain bloomed across her left side. Tyler threw her belongings down after her. A garbage bag, all her clothes fit in a single garbage bag, tumbled down the stairs. A stuffed rabbit, white and worn, that Ava had slept with since she was a newborn. Scattered papers. And the foreclosure notice, crumpled and yellow and covered in red stamps, fluttering down like a dying bird. Cordelia's heels clicked on the stairs as she descended. Each step was deliberate. She was not hurrying. She stepped directly over Aria's body, her shoe missing Aria's ribs by inches. "You have 1 hour to get out," Cordelia said, her voice bored, the way someone might discuss a broken appliance. "If you're here when I come back, I'm calling immigration on your neighbor who watches your bastard kid. The woman in 2C. She's not here legally, is she? Wonder how long it would take them to deport her. Wonder what happens to your daughter while you're fighting that." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Aria did not move. She lay on the concrete stairs, her face screaming, her throat crushed, her vision narrowed down to a single bloodshot eye, and she understood that Cordelia had just eliminated every option she had. There was no fighting. There was no negotiation. There was only this: leave, or destroy the one person who had been kind to her in this entire city. The footsteps receded. The door to the 4th floor opened and closed. Aria crawled down the remaining stairs on her hands and knees. Her ribs sent knife-sharp signals with every movement. Her eye was swollen shut now, just a slit of vision remaining. She gathered the garbage bag. She found the stuffed rabbit. She left the foreclosure notice on the stairs because carrying it felt like carrying a curse. The November night hit her like a slap. The street was empty. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday and the neighborhood had already surrendered to the cold. Neon reflections from a closed bodega window painted the frozen asphalt in shades of pink and blue. Her breath came out in white clouds of pain. She had nowhere to go. The apartment building had been her last address. Before that there had been a shelter. Before that, Tyler's threats and promises and the slow realization that survival meant tolerating men like him. Before that, a marriage and a hospital room and the moment a surgeon had told her that her husband's surgery would cost more than she could earn in 5 years. Aria stumbled to her car, a 2004 Honda that ran on hope and prayer and the persistent assumption that tomorrow it would break down and she would finally know what to do. She climbed inside, locked the doors, started the engine with a sound like something dying. The car knew the highway. It had learned the way by repetition. She drove north on Route 87, away from the city, away from Tyler and Cordelia and the foreclosure notice and the apartment building and Ava. Ava was safe with the woman in 2C, the woman whose name was Maria, the woman who had watched Aria's daughter for 16 months and never asked for payment because she understood that some people were not trying to take advantage, they were just trying to survive. The highway was black. The sky was black. Everything was black except for the occasional flash of headlights from oncoming traffic. 3 miles past the exit for White Plains, the engine died. The car coasted to the shoulder, came to a stop, and would not restart. She turned the key. Nothing. She turned it again. The starter made a grinding sound, the sound of something giving up. Aria sat in the darkness with her hands on the steering wheel and her one good eye fixed on the black road ahead. She had $78 in her wallet. She had a garbage bag of clothes. She had a crumpled foreclosure notice that she had left behind on the stairs but which had burned itself into her memory like a brand. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus years ago, along with hope and dignity and the belief that her life could be anything other than a series of decisions made by other people. The highway was silent except for the sound of the wind pushing against the car, the cold wind that knew her name and wanted her dead. She laid her forehead on the steering wheel and waited for whatever would come next. It was 11:19 p.m. Somewhere across the frozen city, in a house that covered 4 city blocks and occupied 3 entire floors of a building on the Upper East Side, Vincent Calabrese was reviewing financial documents in a study lined with books he had never read. On his desk, face down as always, was a photograph of a baby girl who had been stillborn in the winter of 2012. He was a man built like a fortress. 6'3". Shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of an empire. His hair was dark silver at the temples, swept back from a face that had been handsome before it became a mask. His eyes were the color of winter storms, gray, cold, containing a depth that suggested he had already seen everything the world had to offer and found it lacking. His right hand held a tumbler of whiskey that cost more than Aria earned in a month. His left hand held a stack of photographs showing Tyler Brennan's criminal network, money laundering, human trafficking, extortion of vulnerable women who had no one to protect them. One of Rocco's men had brought the files 30 minutes ago. Rocco was Vincent's first lieutenant, 38 years old, with a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw, a permanent reminder of a debt he had collected in Atlantic City in 1999. He stood in the doorway now, waiting. "The Brennan operation is smaller than we thought," Rocco said. "But it's connected. He has protection from someone. Someone with reach." Vincent did not look up from the photographs. "Find out who. Already on it. And the woman he's been extorting. Aria Bennett. What do we know?" Rocco shifted his weight. This was a question no one expected. Vincent did not ask about women. Vincent did not care about individuals. He cared about leverage and territory and the perpetuation of his empire. He cared about the structure of power and how to maintain it. "She's nobody," Rocco said. "Night shift nurse at St. Mary's. Single mother. Drowning in medical debt from before her husband died. Brennan's been using her apartment as leverage for 2 years." Vincent's jaw tightened. Something flickered in his eyes, quick enough that Rocco almost missed it. "Almost. Bring me everything on Brennan and his associates," Vincent said. "And Rocco. If Cordelia Blackwood is involved in this, I want to know." Rocco nodded and left. Vincent turned back to the photograph on his desk. The baby in the picture had his nose. Had Elena's mouth. Had never drawn a breath. He had not spoken to another human being about Juliana in 12 years. Not her name. Not her existence. Not the way his wife had looked at the perfectly formed, perfectly silent infant, and something in her had simply broken, the way glass breaks when it is struck by the right frequency. Elena had lasted 2 years after that before the grief took her. 12 years of silence since. 12 years of building an empire so vast and so intricate that the federal government had 17 separate task forces dedicated to taking him down, and not one of them had even come close. 12 years of being a man who had learned that some losses could never be reclaimed. Vincent stood and walked to the window. Below him, the city sprawled in patterns of light and shadow. Somewhere out there, a woman was bleeding on a set of stairs. Somewhere out there, a child was sleeping in a stranger's apartment, unaware that her world was about to change. He did not know this yet. He would learn it in exactly 8 minutes. But the machinery was already in motion. Rocco was making calls. Men in black were being roused from their beds. Engines in garages were turning over, and the sound of them starting echoed through the night like a prayer that had never been answered before but might be answered now. The clock on Vincent's wall showed 11:11 p.m. On Route 87, the wind continued its assault. The car was so cold that ice was forming on the inside of the windows. Aria had not moved. She had not turned on the radio. She had not locked all the doors or unlocked them. She was simply waiting, a state she had become expert at over the past 5 years, a state so familiar that it felt like home. Then, in the distance, she heard something. An engine. Not the highway traffic that passed every few minutes. Something different. Something purposeful. Multiple vehicles, moving in formation, slowing down as they approached. She lifted her head. 3 black SUVs emerged from the darkness, moving in perfect synchronization, their headlights cutting through the night. They did not pass her car. They slowed. They pulled onto the shoulder. The headlights filled her damaged eye with white light. A figure emerged from the lead vehicle. He was tall enough that he had to duck to fit through the door. He wore a coat that looked like it had been tailored for someone else and then altered to fit his specific shape, a coat made of fabric so fine it absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. His face was sharp angles and contained violence and something else, something she could not name in the darkness. He walked toward her car. She should have been afraid. She should have locked the doors. She should have started screaming. Instead, when he opened her door and looked at her with those winter storm eyes, all she said was, "My daughter. She's safe. She's with Maria in 2C. Promise me you won't." Vincent Calabrese did not answer. He simply lifted her from the car, cradled her small broken body against his chest, and spoke for words into the radio clipped to his coat. "The child is ours now." And that was how Aria Bennett disappeared from the frozen highway and entered a world where her invisibility would finally end. Rain fell against the study windows in sheets, cold February rain that should have been snow. Aria stood motionless, a folder clutched in her hands, the evidence of 5 years of predatory violence bound in manila and paper. 40 families displaced. Some disappeared entirely. Property flips worth millions. All of it here. All of it real. Her body still ached. The yellow-green bruises on her throat had faded enough that high necklines were no longer necessary, but the memory of Cordelia's fingers remained, pressing, crushing, reminding her throat what it meant to be powerless. She opened the folder again. Her hands trembled. What if this doesn't work? The question arrived unbidden, vicious as a blade through her confidence. What if Tyler comes back? What if Cordelia has lawyers powerful enough to bury this? What if I'm not strong enough to see this through? What if exposing them just makes them hunt harder? She moved to the window. The sleet intensified, turning the garden into a landscape of ice and grey. Her reflection stared back from the glass, still marked, still bearing the signature of violence. She could leave. Vincent had given her enough money. She could take Ava and disappear into another city, another life, another name. Start over. Stay safe. Wasn't that the intelligent choice? Then she heard it. Laughter. Ava's laughter, bright and impossible, cutting through the sound of falling ice. Through the window, she saw her daughter spinning in the garden, the massive German shepherd that Vincent kept alongside her like a four-legged guardian, the dog's mouth open in what looked almost like joy. Ava was laughing the way children laugh when they have forgotten what fear tastes like. Free. Unafraid. Safe for the first time in months. And Aria understood with a clarity that felt like standing in sunlight, if I run, Tyler wins. If I hide, Cordelia wins. And the next woman, the next mother who counts $17 in her pocket and prays it lasts until Friday, she suffers too. She suffers the way I suffered. She takes the bruises. She swallows the humiliation. She disappears. Aria closed the folder. She picked up her phone. The calls began that evening. Vincent listened without interrupting as she outlined the plan. Not violence. Not the kind of justice his world understood. Something cleaner. Something that couldn't be erased. "We give this to a journalist," Aria said, her voice steady now. "Someone known for exposure, corruption, things that don't disappear. We make sure the story is too big to bury." Vincent studied her with those winter storm eyes. "Marcus Webb. You know him." "I know everyone," Vincent said. And it was true. He made one phone call. By dawn, Marcus Webb had copies of everything. The broadcast came on Thursday evening at 6 o'clock. Aria watched from Vincent's study, Ava asleep upstairs, the weight of what was about to happen pressing against her chest like a closed fist. Marcus Webb appeared on the evening news with the particular authority of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. His face filled the screen. Behind him, photographs. Displaced families standing in front of cardboard boxes. Eviction notices. Medical bills. "Tonight we expose what we're calling the landlord predator ring," Marcus said, his voice cutting like a blade through the silence. "Two individuals have built a criminal enterprise on fear, intimidation, and the displacement of vulnerable New York families. Their names are Tyler Brennan and Cordelia Blackwood." The broadcast shifted. Audio recordings played. Tyler's voice, raw and threatening, "Sign the form or I'll make sure you never rent in this city again." Cordelia's voice, dripping condescension, "These people don't understand they're in the way of progress." Financial records scrolled across the screen. Property flips worth $3 million. Properties purchased for $400,000, then sold for $2.3 million after tenants were forced out. 40 families. 40 evictions. Some tenants had simply vanished from the system entirely. 3 blocks away, in his office overlooking the city, Tyler Brennan watched the broadcast with the expression of a man watching his own execution in real time. His face drained of color. His phone began to ring. It didn't stop. Investors pulling out. Partners demanding explanations. Board members calling emergency meetings. He tried to call Cordelia. She didn't answer. In her Manhattan penthouse, 37 stories above the street, Cordelia Blackwood sat frozen in front of her television. Her lawyer spoke frantically into a phone. "This is bad, Cordelia. This is very bad. We need to prepare a statement." She didn't respond. She stared at her own face on the screen, at photographs of families she had destroyed, at the careful architecture of her reputation collapsing in real time. Within 2 hours, the story was the #1 trend across social media. The broadcast video was shared 200,000 times. Former tenants, emboldened by Aria's evidence, came forward with their own stories. Cordelia's business partners released statements, distancing themselves, protecting themselves, abandoning her like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Her board of directors called an emergency session to vote on her removal. The vote was unanimous. Tyler sat in his car outside one of his buildings, now surrounded by protesters holding signs that read, "Predator. Criminal. Thief." His phone rang without cessation. His lawyers informed him of pending federal charges. His accountants told him his assets were being frozen. His investors informed him they were done. He screamed in the empty car. He pounded the steering wheel. "That bitch," he roared. "That nobody bitch destroyed me." But Aria Bennett had stopped being a nobody the moment Vincent Calabrese pulled her from the frozen highway. The next morning, Cordelia held a press conference. She wore a navy suit that had once signified power. Her lawyer stood beside her, his face carefully blank. She began to speak, denying everything, her carefully constructed composure beginning to fracture under the weight of specific questions from reporters who had done their homework. "Ms. Blackwood, how do you respond to the testimony of 42 former tenants? Ms. Blackwood, can you explain the property flip records? Ms. Blackwood, why did your business partner, Tyler Brennan, attempt to flee the state yesterday? She tried to leave. A reporter threw red paint. It splattered across her suit like an accusation made visible. She flinched. She ran. The cameras caught all of it. 48 hours after the broadcast, the arrests came at dawn. FBI agents appeared at Tyler's residential address. He tried to run. Agents tackled him in his driveway while news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting his arrest live on morning television. Handcuffed. Face pressed against asphalt. The king of predatory landlords reduced to a criminal being loaded into a federal vehicle. Cordelia was arrested in her penthouse. She sat on her sofa wearing her nightgown while agents read her federal charges: racketeering, conspiracy, fraud, witness intimidation, extortion. Her lawyer stood beside her, unable to help, unable to change the mathematics of her guilt. The charges were systematic. The evidence was comprehensive. The public humiliation was complete. Tyler Brennan was held without bail. 40 years in federal prison. His properties seized. His bank accounts frozen. Every victim he had ever threatened lined up to testify against him, their faces steady, their voices finally heard. His reputation didn't just collapse. It was annihilated. Expunged. Made historical only as a cautionary tale. Cordelia Blackwood faced similar prosecution as the ringleader, the financial architect of the entire scheme. She would spend decades in federal custody. Her own family released a statement: "We no longer recognize her as family." Her board seats were revoked. Her memberships rescinded. She became a ghost, visible only in news archives and court documents. That evening, Vincent watched the news coverage with Aria beside him on the sofa. Ava slept upstairs, finally secure in a way that didn't feel temporary. The final arrests played across the screen. Vincent turned to look at her. "You did this," he said. "We did this," she corrected. "No," Vincent said quietly. "This was you. I could have destroyed them with violence. You chose something harder. You chose to show the world what they are. You chose the truth as a weapon." Aria watched the screen, watching Tyler's face as he was led away, watching Cordelia's lawyer abandoning her with a single phone call, watching justice move through the machinery of the legal system in a way that couldn't be undone or paid off or escaped. What she didn't know yet was that Vincent had one more revelation waiting. One that would bind them together in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude or rescue and everything to do with a truth he had been carrying alone for 3 years, a truth about why her daughter's laughter sounded familiar, why her defiance felt like coming home, why the moment he saw her broken against that steering wheel, something inside him had recognized something inside her. But that revelation would have to wait until tomorrow. Tonight, Aria Bennett simply sat in the silence of Vincent's study, the sound of rain fading to a gentle patter against the windows, and allowed herself to understand that she had finally become visible. Not because a powerful man had chosen her, but because she had chosen herself first. The nursery had not been opened in 12 years. Vincent Calabrese stood in the doorway on the 3rd floor of his Manhattan estate, one hand pressed against the frame, the other hanging at his side like a weapon he no longer knew how to use. Inside, everything was frozen in white. A crib with rails polished to mirror shine. A mobile with silver stars that caught the afternoon light and scattered it across walls painted the color of dawn. Books on shelves, their spines uncracked. A rocking chair positioned beside the window, waiting for someone who would never come. Aria reached the landing, breathing hard from the climb. She had followed him up without question when he said the words. "There is something you need to see. Something I need to tell you." "Come in," Vincent said. His voice was like gravel beneath water, rough and heavy. She entered carefully, as if the room might shatter. The air smelled like lavender and dust, like memory preserved in amber. On the dresser sat a photograph in a silver frame. A woman with dark hair and Vincent's sharp eyes, cradling an infant wrapped in white. The woman's face glowed with the kind of joy that only exists in photographs now, frozen forever before the world broke it. "Juliana," Vincent said. "My daughter." Elena was her mother. Aria turned to him, understanding beginning to bloom across her face like a bruise. Born February 14, 2012. Dead by March 2. He did not look at the photograph. He could not. A heart defect. Something they could have detected. Something they could have fixed. But we did not have enough information. We did not know to test. She was 2 weeks old when she stopped breathing in her crib. Elena held her when she died. I was in Atlantic City closing a deal. The silence stretched like pulled taffy, sticky and suffocating. I came here once a year, Vincent continued. Every February 14th. To remember that I failed to protect her. To remind myself that power means nothing when the person you love is dying. He paused. His jaw worked. 3 years ago, on this date, I stood on the Route 87 overpass at 3 in the morning and looked down at the highway below. The traffic was light. The fall would have been clean. And I decided it would be easier to fall than to keep carrying this weight. Aria's breath caught. Her eyes widened with the sudden recognition of what he was describing. There was a car, Vincent said. A blue sedan with a broken taillight. It pulled over without warning. A woman got out in the freezing cold wearing nothing but a thin jacket. She climbed the metal fence. She stood beside me on the railing and she said, "Please. Wait. Please wait." Tears slid down Aria's face without sound. She remembered. She remembered that night like it was yesterday, like it had never stopped happening. "You talked to me for 45 minutes, Vincent said. You told me you had lost your father 2 months before. You told me that you understood what it felt like to want the world to stop hurting. You told me that you could not save him, but maybe you could save me. You were shaking from the cold and you were crying and you refused to leave the railing until I stepped down." "I remember," Aria whispered. "You were wearing a dark coat. You said thank you and you walked away and I never saw your face clearly. I tried to follow you but you disappeared into the parking garage. I had Rocco find out who you were," Vincent said. "I needed to know the name of the person who pulled me back from that railing. And then I spent 3 years watching you from a distance, making sure you were safe, making sure no one hurt you." "The car repair," Aria said. "The mechanic who fixed my car for free last year. That was you. I could not let you break down on the highway again. Not alone." He turned to face her fully. "When your husband died, I paid his medical bills. All of them. Every surgery, every medication, every final treatment. $23,416. I sent it anonymously and I waited for him to pass because I knew you would be vulnerable. I knew that when he was gone, people like Tyler Brennan would see an opening." Aria's legs felt weak. She sat down on the edge of the rocking chair, the same chair where someone was supposed to have sung lullabies and told stories and watched a child grow into a woman. "And then I found you on the highway," Vincent said. "Bleeding. Broken. And I knew the universe was not asking me anymore. It was demanding. Demanding that I repay the debt. Demanding that I save the person who saved me." "You don't owe me anything," Aria said, but her voice broke like old glass. "That night I stopped because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. My father had chosen to leave. I couldn't watch someone else choose that darkness." "You were a stranger and you stayed anyway," Vincent said. "You risked your life to save a man you would never see again. You did not know that you were saving the most dangerous person in this city. You did not know that your kindness would echo through 3 years of my life like a bell that refused to stop ringing." He came closer. He knelt down in front of the rocking chair where she sat today. His expensive suit creased at the knees. His tailored jacket folded against his body like he was a man praying instead of a man who had built an empire on the breaking of others. "We saved each other," he said. "That is the truth I have been carrying. You saved me from suicide. I saved you from violence. We are bound to each other not by romance or gratitude or obligation. We are bound by the knowledge that we each chose to see the other when it would have been easier to look away." Aria reached down and touched his face. Her palm against his jaw, his scar rough beneath her fingertips. "Stay," Vincent said. "Not as a guest. Not as someone I rescued. Stay as someone who belongs here. With me. With Ava. With Rocco and Pietro, who are already teaching her Italian curse words they think I don't know about. Stay and build something with me that is not built on violence or fear or the broken bodies of men like Tyler Brennan." "I don't know how to be in this world," Aria said. "I don't know how to be the kind of woman who belongs in mansions and suits that cost more than my old car." "Good," Vincent said. "Because I do not need you to be that woman. I need you to be the woman who stops on an overpass in the dark because someone else is suffering. I need you to be the woman who chooses truth as a weapon instead of guns. I need you to teach me how to live again instead of just surviving in this empire of corpses and secrets." They sat together in the nursery while the afternoon faded. Vincent did not close the door. He left it open to the hallway, as if letting Juliana's memory breathe for the first time in 12 years. Aria talked about the night she stopped on the overpass, about her father's suicide 2 months before, about how she could not bear to see another person choose that kind of darkness. Vincent listened with his hand in hers, her small fingers folded against his palm like a prayer. When they finally left the nursery, neither of them looked back. Some griefs do not need shrines. Some losses need to be honored and then released, like water held too tightly in a fist. 6 months later. Ava Bennett ran through the gardens of the Manhattan estate, her laughter carrying like bells across manicured lawns. She wore a white dress with embroidered flowers. Rocco chased behind her with exaggerated slowness, pretending he could not catch her, sneaking her chocolate biscuits from his jacket pocket when Vincent was not looking. Pietro sat on a marble bench braiding her hair with patient fingers, teaching her Italian words for colors. Color rosso. Red. Color blu. Blue. Color per I giorni tristi. Colors for sad days. Aria stood on the terrace watching them, her hand resting on her stomach. The pregnancy test sat in the bathroom upstairs, hidden in a drawer, waiting to be confirmed at the appointment tomorrow. She was already certain. She felt it the way you feel sunlight, like something warm moving through your body from the inside out. Vincent found her there. He always knew where she would be. His hand came to rest beside hers on the terrace railing, not touching, just present. The foundation helped its 200th family this month, she said. 200 families in 6 months. Tenants who were facing eviction, who were being preyed on like I was. We got them legal representation. We got them protection. Because you chose to remember, Vincent said. You could have let that part of your life fade. You could have chosen to forget Tyler Brennan and what he did. Instead, you chose to transform your pain into purpose. We transformed it, Aria corrected. You gave me the resources. I just showed them where to aim. Tyler Brennan's trial had ended 3 months ago. 40 years federal custody. No possibility of parole. He sat in a cell in Ossining, 6 hours north, counting the days of a sentence that would outlast his life. The prosecutor had shown the jury every text message, every photograph of bruises, every financial record of extortion. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Cordelia Blackwood faced 35 years after her conviction. Her family released a statement disowning her. Her country club memberships were revoked. She was transferred to a federal facility in West Virginia where she shared a cell with a woman named Rodriguez who had spent 8 years as a victim of predatory lending. Sometimes the universe has a sense of poetry. Their empire had collapsed completely. The properties Tyler and Cordelia owned had been seized and sold. The money distributed to their victims. The network of corrupt officials they had cultivated had scattered like roaches when the light was turned on. 1 year later. The city lights reflected off wet asphalt, neon blues and purples and deep crimsons bleeding into the streets. Aria and Vincent walked through the neighborhood where she had once struggled, where every corner held a memory of invisibility. The rain fell soft and steady, the kind that feels like forgiveness. Her hand was in his. His rings caught the light. A wedding band of white gold, worn 3 months now, still shining with newness. She wore its twin beside the diamond he had given her on a night when the stars were clear and the sky felt close enough to touch. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Saving me that night. Every day I wake up and thank God I found you on that highway," Vincent said. "You brought light back into my life. I spent 12 years in darkness and you reminded me what it felt like to hope. What it felt like to want something other than power and control. You taught me that survival is not the same as living. You gave me a life worth living," Aria said. "You took a woman who was invisible and you made her visible. Not because you loved me, but because you saw me." They stopped walking. The rain pattered down, soaking their clothes, and neither of them moved. Behind them, Ava ran ahead with Rocco and Pietro flanking her like bodyguards. The child laughed at something Pietro said, her voice bright and untouched by the darkness that had nearly claimed everyone in her world. "Sometimes the people who seem invisible carry the greatest light," Aria said, and this time she was not speaking to Vincent. She was speaking to you, to everyone watching, to the people who are still counting their change and skipping meals and pretending their world is not collapsing. You never know when the person you dismiss is the one who will save you. The woman cleaning your office building at midnight, her hands raw from bleach, her feet aching in shoes held together with duct tape. The man serving your coffee, working 3 jobs to keep his children clothed, smiling at customers because the tips matter. The single mother counting change at the grocery store checkout, deciding between milk and bread because she cannot afford both. They are fighting battles you cannot see. Carrying weight that would crush most people. And still they show up. Still they try. Still they hope. See the invisible. Speak to the silent. And remember that we are all just people trying to survive until we find the one who teaches us how to live. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story about the people everyone overlooks and the moment everything changes. Comment below, have you ever felt invisible? What helped you find your light? Drop your story and let's build a community of people who see each other. And remember this. No matter how hard life gets, after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.